Outdoors with Ted Ellenbecker, the freshwater angler's #1 source for information. Interesting, informative, at times controversial, but always delivering information that can help make your next outing the best. Your host for today's show, Ted Ellenbecker.
Hey, I'm Ted Ellenbecker, and I'm really happy you're with me today. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about flathead catfish. Now, as you know, there's a lot of times there's people that think that flatheads can be really tough to catch. Well, truth be known, any species can be tough to catch under certain circumstances on any body of water. If you understand that fish as an individual species and you know what elements they're using on the body of water that you're fishing, it just gives you the edge. It allows you to make better decisions on the water. Okay, today we're going to kind of streamline this seminar. Instead of doing the full hour, we're going to probably go about a half hour. We're going to cover the foundation of consistently locating flatheads and potentially putting you on the biggest flathead in the body of water that you're fishing. And I think, that's a nice idea for any of us, I think. So we're going to cover just some very specific but powerful conditions and elements and things you need to know to do this. One area we're going to talk about today is going to be the bait and the presentations. Now, when we're talking about bait, obviously a lot of people have some different ideas about flathead bait, and that's fine, keep them. I'm going to give you mine. I'm going to give you my opinions on the bait, and you take it for what you want, okay? But understand what I'm going to tell you about bait is going to come after 50 years of chasing flatheads. So you take it for what it's worth, all right? Now, the presentation we're going to talk about, going to be one. You're going to use it 90% of the time. We'll discuss a couple alternatives. The next thing we're going to talk about is very important. It's the 3 types of structure that flatheads use. Why at times they're important to you and why at times not so much, okay? But how to use them, how to pick them, and how to understand why the flathead is there when he is. Timing with flatheads is a big deal, okay? Then we're going to finish off with a little prep for your trip, okay? To make a successful trip, it has to do for you what you want it to do, okay? I mean, if you want a trophy fish, good. That's what you're after. You need to prep for that. If you want to just catch a flathead, you need to prep for that, okay? Without doing this, you can really put a jinx on your next outing. So as we're talking about bait, a lot of people have a different opinion about the best bait to use for flatheads. And different bodies of water can be different, so you got to take that into consideration too. All right, some people say live bait, some people say cut bait. I'll tell you what, you can catch a fish on a lot of different things. I've caught flatheads on crankbaits. I've caught them on jigs and minnows. I've caught them on live bait. I've caught very few on cut bait. Cut bait has a particular time of year and condition that it works the best, and we're going to talk about that. When I'm fishing flatheads, my first bait of choice is a green-eared sunfish, basically 5 to 8 inches long and alive. All right, now that is, my personal preference. Now a lot of that will be dictated by the body of water you're on and what you have available, right? Understand that flatheads hunt by vibration and scent, but they're very touchy when it comes to vibration. And when you use a fish like a green-eared sunfish or a bluegill as an example, the body on that fish is wide, so when he moves, he's putting out quite a bit of vibration, whereas say a sucker, he's not putting out as much vibration. So you get a little bit more with the green-eared sunfish or the bluegill type live bait. That's my first choice. Now, I do a little extra to those baits just because, if you're running a 100-yard dash, you run a 10 flat, that's a really great race, right? But if the guy runs a 9.9, he beats you. Well, I want to get that extra 1/10 of a second. I want that extra bite for the day. So when I'm using live bait, I'll take the blunt edge of my knife and I'll just flick a few flakes, a few scales off of that fish. Okay, not enough to hurt him, not enough to make him die, just half a dozen scales off the side. And what that does is it makes that fish put out amino acids and pheromones that he's injured. Makes him an easy target, or the flatheads read it that way, that it's an easy target, okay? So rather than sometimes just biting, crushing, and killing, with this it might make that fish hang on a little longer, might make him hit it again or pick it in, take it in deeper, and get you the hookup. Because of that, it's very possible. I think it does happen, okay? My second choice of live bait where I am is bullheads. We can't use a lot of baits. We can't use crappies. We can't use game fish. We can't use, but we can use green ears and bluegills and bullheads and white suckers and red horse and crick chubs. And anyway, my second choice is a bullhead. And I do the same thing with them, only they don't have scales. So I will just simply scrape the skin a little bit back by the tail, and that does the same thing. It puts a little bit of a scent out on that fish, okay? A little extra, all right? And the extra is always a good thing. Now, I do clip the dorsal fin when I'm catching my bullheads for bait, not necessarily because I think that the flatheads like it more, but just to save on my hand. I don't like getting poked through the palm in the middle of the night, And bullheads, the size is about the same, 5 to 8 inches is about what I want. I don't really like the great big 10, 12-inch bullheads, and I don't like the 3 or 4-inch bullheads much either. I don't think they put out enough vibration. But a bullhead is very durable, okay? Although green ear is pretty durable too. You'll find that out. And a third choice, if you want to know, would be a crick chub. A nice big crick chub would be my third choice. But I would prefer not to do that. I do always try to go with 2 baits. I always try to take some green ears and some bullheads. As far as cut bait, yeah, cut bait can work, and it works better in certain circumstances, certain conditions, and I'll tell you about that. But I'm also going to tell you something that the game departments will tell you, and that is that we'll just say trophy-sized fish, bigger fish, 10 pounds and up type fish, on all species, blues, channels, flatheads, are meat eaters. They like to eat live fish, period. They do. That is their favorite when it's available. So think about that when you're choosing baits. As far as cut bait goes, there are a couple of situations where, well, it can work pretty good for you. I like my odds a little higher. I prefer live bait. But like in the spring, say you get a shad kill, all fish, take advantage of situations. They really do. And if you've got a good shad kill going on, every fish in that lake is going to be eating some dead shad. Or any other type of a winter kill, that will constitute a good bite, potentially, for cut bait. Except, remember, when you're using cut bait, the one thing you're eliminating is any vibration. Unless you're using cut bait in a particular way. And that would be, say you're drift fishing or you're bumping, drift fishing, slow trolling, and you've got your bait, floated or just elevated on a 3-way off the bottom in a current, and you cut it more in a fillet rather than a chunk. So it's actually basically swimming in the current or swimming as you're moving the boat along. So you do get a little vibration out of that, a little more, well, let's just say, live fish look. The smaller fish are less picky for a number of reasons. There are greater numbers of small fish. They have to eat what they can get a hold of. So that changes a little, it really does. Just like channel cats as an example, prepared baits like cheese baits, dough baits, dip baits, that type of thing. Most of the fish you're going to catch are going to be under 10 pounds. And it's just because those baits do put out the scents or proteins. They do put out amino acids, and that is what all predator fish zero in on when they're eating. But again, the bigger fish, the 10-pound type class and up, they do prefer the live bait, the real thing. So just keep that in mind when you're choosing your baits. Do keep your bait fresh. When you're using live bait also, try not to overhook them. Size-wise, the whole advantage of a live bait is vibration. If you weight a smaller bait down with, say, a 10-aught hook and you poke a bullet-sized hole through him, you're going to lose some of the vibration. You might gain a little on scent, but you're going to lose on the vibration. I can add the scent, like I said, by scraping a few scales, you know, bruising the skin a little bit, but I can't add vibration. So you want enough hook to handle the bait and to handle the fish you're fishing for, but you don't want to put a bullet hole through your bait and kill him or just injure him bad enough to where he's not putting out for you. All right, so now let's look at just one type of a rig. But I'll be honest, you're going to use this rig about 95% of the time when you're fishing flatheads, and which makes it really nice, okay? This is going to be just the simple slip rig, as you can see. Now the line I'm using here is just so you can see the line, okay? You can adapt your leader, strength and length, and you can adapt your main line and sinker weight and everything else. So basically you just have your choice of hook, which I want to adapt again to the size of my bait and to the size of fish I'm going to catch, all right? And to the type of presentation. And you have your leader to your hook and then to your swivel where your sinker goes up on your main line. Now your leader length is going to depend on the presentation you're using and the type of cover you're fishing. Say you're still fishing next wood, whatever, you're going to want to shorten your leader up to maybe even 8 inches so that fish cannot, so your live bait cannot get up underneath things and get buried in a rock or under a branch or whatever and not get found. Okay, if you're in open water, go ahead and give them a little bit more, up to like 12 inches on this bottom rig, okay? And that'll let them move around a little bit, and it also makes it easier for a flathead to pick him up. The main line, again, strength and type of line, personal opinions, and type of structure. Obviously, heavier structures, bigger wood, that type of thing, you're going to need heavier main lines and leaders. Open water, not so much. Okay, just adjust your drags and you'll work out fine for it. That's your choice, the best. The equipment should be chosen because of your comfort level with it. If you're comfortable and confident in your equipment, you will fish better. So that's all I'm going to say about that. The structures, the 3 types of structures, the 24-hour feeding period, and the sight fidelity that flatheads have for particular structures. Okay, this is where you learn how to outthink the flathead and make better decisions. But you have the nursery, the staging structure, and the feeding platform. Okay, and flatheads use all 3. However, the first one, the nursery, really doesn't have an awful lot of value for you as an angler because that's exactly what it is. It's a nursery. And unless you're fishing for like an aquarium fish with a little piece of worm or something, nurseries generally are not going to produce a big fish unless they're just moving through with tight, compact areas that the little fish can get into, basically, and the big fish can't. And in the flathead world, that's important because if the big fish can get a hold of the little fish, there just aren't going to be any. So that's your nursery. But because of the way it's built, as a rule, it really isn't going to hold big fish, at least not numbers of big fish. So now we're going to move to the second type of structure, which is a staging structure. And this structure is really kind of fun because, well, it's the one that you guys always fish. It's the one that I always fish too. Sometimes you can see them above the surface, like a big log jam. Okay, that big common one. Bridge pilings. Depth really doesn't matter. It's more how it's built. The fish want to stage there, literally, during the day. Call it resting if you want. However, if you put it on their nose in the middle of the day, they're going to hit it just as aggressively as they will in the middle of the night. So anyway, a staging structure, what I usually work on in my area is a big log jam. Now some of them you can't see, some are underwater, you only see the structure with your electronics, okay? But we'll just say it's a big log jam. But there's something that happens on staging structures, and if you've fished a lot, you've experienced this. Let's just say that we're going fishing today and we're going to fish a log jam. That's where we're starting. Okay, now it could be a big riprap, it could be wing dikes, it could be whatever, but we're going to fish a log jam. So I get there, about 2 hours before dark, so I show up about 7 o'clock. because I like to get there and get set up in the light. I like to enjoy my fishing. I don't want to trip in the river while I'm trying to get set up. I want to make a few casts and make sure I understand where I have access to that log jam without getting continually hung up, if I'm in a boat or otherwise on bank, okay? Now, what happens when a structure like this, usually it's a good structure because it's usually bigger. A lot of times has connection to the bank, has cutouts, has access to the channel, has a current line going around an end of it or around both ends of it. A lot of different things. Good, solid elements, and we'll talk about the good elements for flatheads in just a minute. But on this structure, you're set up and you're fishing, and yep, about 9 o'clock, you know, the witching hour, right before the sun goes down, you get a bite. Perfect. Catch a nice flathead. 15, 20 minutes later, you get another bite, your partner gets a bite, you miss one, you catch one, and this goes on, until usually we'll say between 12 and 1. And at that point, you're looking at your partner and you're going, oh man, they quit biting. Well, did they? You know? Well, here's the deal. If you have a fishing buddy like I got, at this point, he's on his phone and he's calling the guy downstream, one of his buddies, and he's saying, you know, we're on this really great log jam. We thought we were going to kill them, and man, we caught 4 really nice fish until about midnight, and then they just quit biting. Well, your buddy's going to probably say the same thing. Yeah, we haven't had a bite for an hour, right? Well, did they quit biting? No, probably not. Because what happened is they've moved to the third type of structure, and that is the feeding platform. If you understand that flatheads like to feed in under 10 foot of water, and it's because of how they're built, the undercut jaw, okay? They like to cruise about 8 inches off the bottom. They like to strike up. If they're in 22 foot of water, that bait fish can get away from them. Or they can't even recognize that the bait fish is there because they're too far away. In 10 foot of water, they can use their sonar and they can pick those bait fish out basically to the surface. They can come up underneath them and take them. Okay? They use their whiskers, they use their other senses to cruise a little off the bottom to find the fish that are in front of them and right directly below them. That's the way they like to feed. Okay? That's documented in studies, not done by me, but done by game and fish departments. That's documented. Okay? They like the shallower water. That's where they feed. And it's, you know, I found it to be very true in my own fishing experience. Now this is after dark, except in early season, okay, and late fall, when they're staging to go to their wintering grounds and when they're coming out of. Pretty much these fish can be caught 24 hours a day if you're putting the bait in front of them. So what happens now with this feeding platform? The feeding platform is going to be shallow. Just picture a riffle, the area below a riffle. You've got usually a little channel, a little sandbar, stuff like this, a shallow bank on one side, deep bank on the other side, or a dam, a bay, where you have deeper water in the center and then the shoulders, or the outside edges shallow up. You're going to find that a flathead will come out of the channels, out of the deeper water, out of the staging structures, and work up along those edges. Why do you think that guys that put out set lines, trot lines, and all this kind of stuff, put them along the banks? Well, it's because these big fish move along those shallower banks, along that structure, along those elements to hunt. That's the way it works. Now, a flathead can move up to a mile, I believe, at night to get to where he wants to go. Now, let's go back to the log jam where we're just fishing on. You know, like we said, well, they're going to start biting again in the morning, right? They quit biting. And everybody's going to agree. They're going to start biting in the morning. At sunrise, they're going to start biting again. So we're just going to sit here. Well, that's fine, but it's not that they start biting again. It's that these fish come back to their staging area. These fish are very much homebodies. They like to go back. And studies done by game fish and parks departments have shown that they will return to the structures that they left. Sometimes almost to the exact spot they were laying in during the day. These fish are coming back, you get bites. That's what happens with that, okay? Now, you can use this in a lot of ways, okay? Number one, the ideal setup is to have a staging structure you start with at sunset, okay? It gets to be about midnight and you move up along the shallow bank or up below a ripple that's, you know, a quarter mile or 200 yards or 100 yards away from this staging structure. You follow the fish. Another way to use this knowledge is, say you have private property or bank fishing, you can't get to a great big set of log jams down there, a big set of wing dikes, a big set of whatever that you know, bridges that you know are holding fish, but you can't get there. Trespassing thing, okay? If you can find a feeding platform up above that, within a couple 100 yards, you can wait for those fish, even a quarter mile. You can wait for those fish to come to you that night and catch the same fish that you would have been fishing for in that big structure. The only issue with this is you're going to have to wait for them to come to you. Right? Well, flatheads at night can move up to a mile to their feeding platform. And that's kind of what we're counting on here. We've got a good structure. I've already shown you that. We've got some great elements. But below us, downriver, we've got a lot of structure, a lot of elements, a lot of wood elements. And that can hold some fish that aren't here yet. But after dark, when they start moving out to feed, what we're counting on is some fish moving up from the elements that are downstream from us and coming up to this feeding platform, to this channel, this current line, and this break to do their night feeding, and that's when we're going to start getting hit. Sure. Well, you may catch singles coming through a big staging structure because what's below that staging structure? Are there other smaller staging structures that are holding single fish, that kind of thing? And at sunset, they're just moving up and they're coming through that structure too. You need to look at that. You know, so there are variables involved. But as a rule, they will move out of that staging structure to a feeding platform and in the morning move back to that staging structure. You can choose to wait or you can choose to try to follow them. You can choose to cut them off. That's up to you. But that's information that will help you make a better decision for your outing. Be more concerned about holding your bait in place. It's the presentation, it's getting that bait in front of that fish. Where is he now, or where is he going to be in a half hour? That's where you want your bait. Next thing is timing. A lot of people don't think about this, but like we just talked about, the staging structure early or early morning, I would want to be back on the staging type structures. Okay. Late night, I'm going to move to a feeding platform, or I'm going to put my baits up along a feeding platform if I can, if I have that option. That's just it. So your timing, spring, now up here in the spring when they're making a pre-spawn run, you know, I can catch fish on any good structure. Anywhere there's a stoppage on the river where those fish will pool up below there to feed. Low head dams type thing, good riffles. Big obstructions, big wood obstructions that break the current type thing, fish they'll pool up below that type of structure and hold, and you'll catch fish pretty much all day if you work it right. In the spring, that's early, that's pre-spawn stuff. Okay. After that finishes, they'll back down off of some of those low heads unless the current increases. That's something you need to watch too. If you're going to fish low heads, in a low water situation, they're probably going to back off them a little bit. You get an increase in the current because of rain or water releases or whatever, those fish are going to move back up into the area of that dam, along current lines, current breaks, channel ledges, okay? I want to add two things to the information about structure and elements in a body of water. When you're fishing flatheads, a couple of things really matter for the quality of that structure. Number one, the power of the elements. And an element gains power, like I always say, because of two things. Its relationship to another good element or its own size and mass. The bigger the better. The more relationships to other elements your species are interested in, the better. But also, a little stick in the water won't necessarily hold fish. Okay, a 30-foot cottonwood has some power to hold fish. That's your example. The other thing is old elements. Let's just take the tree again. You got a tree laying in the water over a channel. This is a great start to a structure. But if that tree still has green leaves on it, I'm not going to say it won't have a fish sitting on it, but is it going to consistently concentrate and hold fish? No, because it's not part of that body of water yet. After that tree's been there, and this is for rocks or bridge pilings or anything, but after that tree's been there for a year or two, it becomes part of the water. The current, the water has inherited it. The current has cut channels. It's tore the bark off. You now have shrimp, you now have leeches, you now have water bugs, you now have moss, you now have all kinds of things living in there. Turtles and leeches and everything, okay? Bait fish, now it's part of the water. It has more power to hold and concentrate fish, obviously. So big and old. Now, if that's a bridge piling, obviously older the better, where stuff is washed out. Even old abandoned bridges are the best. They're drop dead good. A lot of elements involved. Current breaks, channel cuts, undercuts, all kinds of stuff. Okay? Big and old. Also, you know, I've really found that a wood element for flatheads is a real primary concern. If I can put structures together with wood elements involved, that is what I'm going to do. Okay, now a wood element could be a lot of things. It could be standing timber, down timber, log jams, whatever. But wood elements, that is a magnet for flats. They like it. So now we're prepping for the trip. Well, you know, prepping for the trip is just as important as going a lot of times. To start out with, what do you want? You want a flathead? Sure. Do you want a personal best though? Do you want a state record, or do you just want to connect with a flathead because you haven't caught a lot of them yet? All of those are okay, but you need to pick a body of water that offers that for you, because if it doesn't, you've lost before you started. You need to match your equipment to the type of elements you're going to be fishing. Just a couple examples. If you're going to fish big old wood, big old log jams, if it's short distances from you, if you can fish vertically or get real close so you're not casting a long distance, I want heavy mono for my leaders. I want heavy mono for my main line because it's very abrasion resistant. It's very strong. It's somewhat forgiving. It has a little stretch to it, and you're going to be close quarters with a big fish and heavy cover. You can't let him move around a lot. You cannot let him go backwards on you. Okay? However, if you're going to fish open water or someplace, say bank to bank or whatever, you can't get exactly where you want to go, I'm going to go with braid line. Like a 60-pound braid main, 60-pound braid leader. That will catch a lot less current than the mono. It gives you a lot further casting distances. Okay, just something to think about. You need the equipment that lets you do your job properly. Adjust your hook, bait, lure, adjust your bait size, adjust your hook to fit your bait. Pick your body of water, go find a PB. I hope this information gave you something to think about. I hope it helps you on your next outing. If you practice this information, if you work with it, you will find more fish consistently.
From everyone here at Outdoors with Ted Ellenbecker, thank you for joining us today. Safe travels, and may your next outing be the best.